Okay, so I think we're live. Leon,
Yeah.
great to have you with us, and thank you everyone for joining the Human Edge podcast, which is a series really about personal and business transformation. My name's Shamouelian. I'm a headhunter by profession, and I help companies scaling their teams, searching for the right talent. And I also work with executives, helping them think about their next move. I'm really happy, delighted that today we're joined by Leon Kammer, who is an executive coach. We're going to be discussing a really interesting topic, something I'm quite passionate about myself, which is it's never too late. So Leon is an accredited ICF coach. He specializes in coaching corporate executives. His clients include Microsoft, other organizations, as well as private one-on-one clients. Leon has a really interesting background. He's lived in 6 countries. He was born in Kazakhstan, raised in Australia. Interestingly, became a coach at the age of 75 years and believes passionately that it's never too late to begin. Leon, thank you very much for joining us today. I should also say happy birthday, as I believe this is a big year for you, correct?
You can. It's coming up on January 25th. I'll be the happy Aquarian. Yeah, it's a big number. It's a big number. I started coaching at 75, and this is the big number. And it's one I've kind of, shied away from, but I've embraced it now. I've come to terms with it. I like to say, from an age point of view, I came out of the cupboard. So people used to ask me my age, and, I was always a bit, they'll think I'm old, but it's okay. It's fine. I'm actually quite proud of it now. So I'm ready to have the 80 candles on the cake.
Great, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And the executive coaching world, it's a big business. I mean, it's about a $14 billion size market. In the US alone, where I'm based, I know you're based in the UK. I checked, recently, I think there's around, at least 23,000 life coaching businesses. Probably, it sounds quite a small number, probably a lot more. How did you become an executive coach, Leon? Tell us about your journey.
Well, in some ways, it kind of found me. In fact, it did find me. I never, wasn't planned. I've been in many businesses, an entrepreneur at heart, I guess, if you want to give it that name. But I started in the fashion business in Australia in my 20s, built up a brand, did the whole fashion course, then diversified into PR. I was in show business for a while, believe it or not. And then I got into the health and nutrition. I seemed to do everything. At that time, I was doing everything before I was ready, if that makes sense. Like in PR, I had no idea how to write press releases, but, I hit the ground running, learned on the job. So I've done a lot of stuff. It wasn't all easy. A lot of it was challenging. There was no other place to go except coaching. When I came to London, I realized, the experiences are there. I've done the stuff, good and bad, sensational successes, sensational failures. I'm at quite a ripe age, to say the least. So I thought it's the only way to go, and I love it. So apart from having the accreditation and so on and so forth, which I got at the age of 79, the International Coaching Federation accreditation. Apart from that, I think really my executive coaching comes from my personal experiences. So it found me.
Right, that's great. That's great. Beautiful. I mean, one topic I'm, really passionate about, and it comes up a lot in my work as a headhunter, is actually around age, because something that, we talk a lot, our clients, often will come to us, and diversity is important for them, whether it's sex or race, beliefs. We actually talk less about age. It comes up. I have a lot of candidates that, who are actually not that old even, who come to me thinking that they might have missed out on opportunities because, the manager was looking for someone more dynamic, right? Which often is a politically correct word of way of talking about age. Why do we have this thinking today?
I think the ages thing has come in since the whole tech boom and apps and young-made billionaires and the opportunity for young guys that are, techie to become millionaires and billionaires overnight has kind of created a myth where suddenly people that are, normally would be of the right age to go for any job see themselves as young. But I think that's an illusion in many ways, and I don't believe that you can beat experience. So these people that are thinking they're too old, I think your candidates, I think they should look from what are my qualifications, what are my experiences, what have I developed, what are my values, and these are things that you can't buy experience. So not to look at that landscape of how all the young guys are making it. You've got to ignore that, and you've got to look at what you have to offer.
Yeah.
Your age and your experiences from that age. So in actual fact, it's a bonus.
Absolutely. And I think there's also an element of sort of confidence building, perhaps that individual didn't have to think about when they were younger, because nobody was questioning them from that perspective. But as you go further on in your career, sometimes actually, we have to revisit our own self-esteem, areas for development. I think there's also an influence from film, the culture of film as well, perhaps on the age question as well. I mean, back in the day, we used to be the other challenge, right? That actually, young people weren't given a chance because they hadn't done enough years in a job, right? Which is also being challenged. So we have those two dynamics sort of almost competing each other, and there seems to have been a convergence there. What would be, you talked a little bit about this. I mean, what would you be your advice to someone later on in their career who wants to have a career shift? And you've obviously reinvented yourself a number of times in the different professions and businesses you've been in. What would you say to somebody who, isn't necessarily the retiring type, who wants to reinvent, or have a shift?
I always say start before you're ready, because if you dwell and procrastinate, procrastination is the killer of potential. So start before you're ready, and always look at the qualities that you do have, because people have a tendency to say, well, I'd like to start a new career, but I don't know anything about that. Well, wait, what do you know? What experiences have you developed? What do you have? And how can you use those into that new career? How can you come putting that on the table? Because you've got experiences. So you may not be totally ready for this, but you've got experiences, you've got qualities, you've got stuff that you've done. I think too often we forget the things that we have conquered. Like, we've jumped the 6 hurdles or 7 hurdles, but we say, okay, but I'm not good enough for this. But hang on, you're bringing a lot to the table already. So it's coming from an I am enough attitude. Yes. I am enough. Absolutely. So I am enough. Start before you're ready.
Yeah, that's great. And I know some people who've made a successful shift, some have launched, I think it depends on your personality. Some have gone straight in, and some have tested the water where they're perhaps still in another career. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, especially for somebody's, if somebody knows that they need that stability to test the water while they're already in another role. It might not be ideal for them, but be to making those, a lot of people have more than one job these days. Moonlighting is not uncommon. And so to manage that process can be really beneficial as well. And how with that, with that dynamic, how would you advise people of an older generation to work if they're encountering perhaps a younger manager that they need to work with? So that's something that comes up. Often I find, a younger manager I might be working with who's a client naturally might want to feel more comfortable employing somebody younger than them, even though they're not going to say that. They can't say that, right? Nobody can, but subconsciously they might feel that way. How would you advise, first of all, that manager, and secondly, the person who's taking that job and reporting into somebody with significantly less experience than themselves?
I think it's a mistake to be threatened by anything. I think that always boils down to a personal ego. He's too young to tell me what to do. He's too old for me to tell him what to do. I think you can learn from each other there. I think, again, the older person brings experience. The younger person brings newfound ideas, newfound technology to give to the old person. So as long as they work in a sort of a camaraderie and put their egos aside, and I think you could have a discussion about that in the beginning. You could be very open, put on the table, look, you're a lot younger than me, I'm older than you, you're going to tell me what to do. I'm prepared to handle it. It's not my ideal thing, but I know I can learn something from you. Do you feel you can learn something from me? So it's about kind of setting boundaries and making that agreement between them in the beginning. I think it'd be a great discussion to have.
Yeah, I think all of these shifts that we're seeing in the workplace are really making us as individuals really go to another level, right? And we're having to deal with not just the fact that people are obviously working longer, right? So they're retiring later, but there's been all sorts of shifts around. There's been we saw with COVID, with everything going on in the world, there's a lot more there's a lot more noise out there. There's a lot more for people to deal with and overcome. And it's no longer just about being good at your job. You have to manage a lot more complexity psychologically and emotionally, would you say, these days? Or is that just how it's always been?
No, 100% you have to manage. I think when you gave those statistics before about coaching being such a growing business, I think that's very much related to your question.
Right.
Mental health. People have got a lot more. The whole landscape is a lot more emotional, a lot more competitive. People are worried about AI. People are worried about their age. There's a lot more, I suppose, fear in the marketplace. But again, we can't let that infiltrate into where we're going. We can't allow that to become part. We can't let emotion come into that aspect. We've got to just embrace it, move forward, do the best we can. And I understand that it's more difficult. But life is good and bad, and that's good. We can only from the things, we can only learn from these things. We can only grow from these things. So look at it as something to grow from. And it is tough, and it is more emotional. There is more anxiety. I mean, I know with my clients, and there is more concern, more fears, more worries, but we can manage them when we realize that they're a learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. And what about technology? How would you advise your clients if you're working with a client? I mean, it can be any age, because just because you're young doesn't mean you're going to be savvy in terms of technology. How would you advise keeping up or being ahead of the curve in terms of innovation in technology and learning and growth?
I think the first thing is not to be scared of it. I think there seems to be a lot of fear, like already we're reading every day about, is AI going to take over our lives? We don't know where it's going. So while that hasn't happened yet, because I coach a lot of Microsoft executives, middle management, top executives, and there's always talk of that. So I suppose from a coaching aspect, I can't really give advice of that. All I can say is, again, if we face things with fear, if we assume, see, a lot of the time we're assuming things are going to happen. So what we're actually doing is, with our assumptions, we're creating anxiety in the future. People only ever worry about what the future is. Right now, in the moment, there is no worry. But people always worry about the future. They get anxiety about the future, and they kind of contaminate that future. They clutter that future, and they bring those worries that haven't happened yet into the now. So they operate with the future into the now, and they make the future a doom and gloom.
Absolutely.
And so I'm suggesting don't do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't. Often the things we worry about aren't the things that end up manifesting. It's such a waste of time, a complete waste of time.
And they never work out the way we were. We're going to turn left, and by chance we turn right, and something better happens. And 2 years later, we look back and we say, if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have met my partner. If that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have gone into that business. So there's a saying that says, life goes on while you're busy making plans.
Exactly. I think that's beautiful. I think we can all think of lots of examples where, you know, I can trace back an example of where I lost a job in the UK. And if I really think about it, if that hadn't happened at the time, it was quite quite challenging. It was very distressing for me. But if it hadn't happened, I don't know if I'd have met my husband the way I did, you know, because I wouldn't have taken that leap to go to the US and all the rest of it. So so many things. I'm sure you have examples in your own life as well. And so that's the beauty of life as well. What would be your advice around sort of growth in terms of learning? I mean, something I advise, when I talk to candidates around you know, the technology dynamic, something that I try and help them think about when they're mapping out their career is really thinking about, you know, where is the industry you're in. It is important to take a strategic approach, and there's a lot of information out there in terms of where that industry is going to be in a few years' time, to think about the viability of it, to think about are their clients going to be buying from them, in which case are you going to have a job, and to really kind of play that back. I think there's a lot to be said there, but you can make smart moves in your career by positioning yourself in the right industry. Often the candidates I find who are the most successful, you know, of course they've got all the right aptitudes, but they've also been smart about where they've placed themselves. They've placed themselves in an industry that has you know, a lot of competitors. So there's a lot of companies they can move to. They've placed themselves in an industry that they know is ripe for investment. And some people don't think about this. So this happens organically. But if I look back on my career, I think there's a lot to be said where I've made moves where it hasn't gone so well. If I'd taken a step to really analyze the market of that particular organization in more detail, actually, I think there would have been a lot of value in that as well. So there is quite a lot to be said, would you say, in terms of strategic planning and thinking in that way?
I think don't become complacent.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have wishful thinking.
Yes.
Be aware, grow, learn where you have to. Even from my perspective, from an executive coach's point of view, I have a coach.
Yeah.
I have a coach. And I think just be aware of what's going on. Don't become complacent. You know, you don't know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years. Be prepared, learn, have your eyes open, have your ears to the ground. And it doesn't mean that suddenly you need to become an astronaut overnight, you know, but you need to know what's going on. And I think some people like to kind of put their head in the sand when that goes on, for 2 reasons. One, they're not sure if they can make the cut in learning the next steps, so they rather not go there. It's like, you know, I'll never be able to play the piano. I'll look at the piano, but I'll never be able to play it, so I'm not going to touch it, you know, right. That kind of thing. You know, it's almost a fear of going there in some aspects, but, you know, it's look. I'm at a ripe old age where I had to learn. Not that I'm a tech master, but I had to learn things that people of my age don't know, and you can learn them. And the great thing about learning is it's like driving in a fog.
Yeah.
You know, how do you drive in a fog? Drive the first meter, then the next meter, then
That's
the
a
next
beautiful
meter.
analogy.
And pretty
I like
soon,
that. How do you drive in the
pretty
fog?
soon. Yeah, and then you get to your destination.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And isn't it funny how we do that? You've driven in a fog. We all have. You cannot see everything. It's quite anything, and it's quite fascinating. And you sort of move, and the car's moving. You can't actually see, and then it's gone through that first mile, and then the second mile, and then you reach your destination. You don't even know how you got there, but you drove in a fog.
That's beautiful. I love that analogy, Leon. That's great. It's this time of year, so when we're doing this recording, where it's the beginning of the year, it's often a time where people come back from their vacations, from their holidays. They're in the new year, they've reflected perhaps a bit on life with their families. So they're thinking about either potentially starting a new job, in my case, in terms of the people I work with, or they've come back to find news that the commission scheme isn't quite what they wanted. All of these kind of things come up often at this time of year. Looking for a new opportunity or business opportunity, that can involve meeting with a lot of rejections. What is your advice here? How can we deal with rejection, overcome it? How have you seen others use this as a tool for personal transformation as well? What's been your own experience, Leon?
Most people take rejection, and I don't think any of us are free from that. But to learn not to take rejection personally, it's a bit like being an actor. Being an actor, to make it as an actor. My daughter's an actress, working actress, and being an actor. This is the analogy, is like you might get a million no's. You can't take it personally because that role is not right for you. That role is not right for you. So if you don't take it personally and don't dwell, because often when you're rejected, it can be quite emotional. You take it personally. I'm not good enough. They don't want me. I'm a loser. All those things can go through somebody's mind, but get rid of all that. Don't dwell on that. They're not rejecting you. You're not for the role.
Yeah.
So, use it as a learning curve, get stronger from it. And actually, rejection can make you quite bulletproof after a while if you don't take it personally, and you can get stronger from it. So rejection is not personal. You're not right for that role. Yeah. Don't dwell, move on.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it can go in two ways. Sometimes I've seen in life with candidates I've worked with, or in my own life, it can go in two directions. Sometimes the test is for you to get more resilient and skilled in that area. I can think of an industry I was trying to get into in my 20s. I got quite a few rejections in that space. And then, eventually I went to one of the competitors, got interviewed. This was like the third company I'd been to in this sector. So some people could have said, perhaps this isn't for me. But for some reason, I was determined to work in the space because wrongly or rightly, I wanted, and it was a good thing at the time. I wanted to travel. It was going to give me opportunity to travel a lot, earn decent money while I was still at early stage in my career. And it was the third time when I then got that yes. And that's when, it's quite magical when you've gone through that kind of pain and that process to get through that. Equally, sometimes it's that we're barking up the wrong tree. I can think of an example when I moved to the US, for example, and I was actually, this is before I went into headhunting, I was in sales. And I was going for head of sales roles, thinking or a sales executive roles, thinking that's what I was going to do. I was sort of about 5 interviews into a process. It was going on and on and on, far too many interviews. And I ended up getting rejected. But that's when, because I put in all that effort, that's when I got a little whisper from the universe, shall we say. Somebody suggested to me, happened just to say to me, I think you'd be really good in recruiting. And so sometimes it's to test us in that space because we're meant to be in it. Sometimes it's to totally take us elsewhere, right? To take us really to where we're meant to be doing. But we have to put in that effort, right? We have to take those steps forward.
And don't take it so personally all the time. Don't take it personally. And you're right, it does make you resilient. And when you do get that yes, it's so much more celebratory.
Right, absolutely. And just to sort of conclude, I think we covered a lot of really, really good topics here. What would you, looking back, is there anything you do differently, during your career? What advice would you give to somebody starting out in their career?
Number one is don't have regrets, because regrets are a waste of time, because they're all, everything you do, experiences and building blocks to what is, pointing you into what you should become. I wouldn't be coaching now if I didn't take some of the risks I've taken, in the last 100 years. I wouldn't be coaching now, so don't have regrets. But one thing I would do is I would probably, when you're younger, you talk more than you listen. and listening is much more powerful than talking. And sometimes I think when people are starting off, especially in corporations, they have a tendency, in the boardroom to say more than they need to say because of wanting to be credible. Yeah. So they speak, and I used to do that. Oh, I know the answer to that. Yeah. That kind of thing. I can remember that in my youth. So I'd probably say to people, listen more. And when you're young, that's a hard one to do because you're enthusiastic, you want to talk, you want to show people, that you're cool, that you know all the answers, but you don't know all the answers. So it's not a regret, but if I had it over again, I'd probably listen more, and listening is much more powerful than talking. So that's about the only tip I'd give. But I will say, don't have regrets. Don't have any regrets ever, because it's all part of the tapestry. It's all leading you somewhere.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Leon. And really good to have you on the Human Edge podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can get in touch connect with Leon, hear about his insights. He also posts quite a lot on Instagram, various other media platforms himself, so you can keep up to date with what he's doing, and reach out also for more questions. Leon, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thanks again.